Hey everyone, welcome back. I wanted to have a quick chat with you all about the 2024 Republican presidential primary. Yesterday we saw the official campaign announcement of Nikki Haley, and I highly doubt that she's going to be the last person to try and challenge Donald Trump for the Republican Party's nomination. Now, we could do a video where we cover all the people who are suspected to be running for president, but honestly that would be a very long video. So instead, we're going to break the candidates down into three separate groups and assess the message that their campaigns are likely to put forward, as well as the pros and cons of each group in both the primary and general election. The first group of candidates we're going to discuss are essentially trying to beat Trump at his own game, so let's call them Trump 2.0. The most famous member of this camp is, of course, Florida Governor Ron DeSantis, but it also includes Governor Kristi Noem of South Dakota and failed gubernatorial candidate Kari Lake of Arizona. All of these candidates are essentially trying to embrace the ideas that Trump put forward, especially when it comes to culture wars and being very aggressive in your attacks on your opponents, being very direct in the attempt to beat the Democrats and own the libs. The only real distinction they're drawing between themselves and Donald Trump is that, hey, I'm not Donald Trump, so I can win. One of the more direct versions of this was a recent response given by Ron DeSantis when Donald Trump attacked him, where DeSantis simply said, "Yes, but I won re-election." So, these candidates are simply going to the Republican Party and saying, we know that you want Trump, but Trump is damaged goods. Look at the last 3 election cycles, he can't win. We can give you everything Trump did without being Trump, and therefore we will win. And there is a certain percentage of the Republican base that is definitely keyed in on that, especially with DeSantis, who has been leading Donald Trump in several different polls, and they've kind of been jockeying for that front-runner position. So, yeah, there are a bunch of Republicans who've accepted the reality that Donald Trump probably can't win another election. But if we vote for DeSantis, he did well in re-election in Florida, did very, very well, as a matter of fact. So someone like him could come onto the national stage, give us the same kind of candidate that we want, and hopefully win the election as opposed to Donald Trump. Now, again, they're going to play very well in the Republican primary as they're really feeding into that emotional core of the base that Donald Trump tapped into, and I think they can do very well with that, and the polls reflect it. However, the big issue that this group of candidates might have is when they get to the general election. We saw in 2022 that lots of candidates who were backed by Trump and very much tried to imitate his style failed, especially in critical battleground states like Arizona, Pennsylvania, and Georgia. So, while these candidates definitely have their appeal to the Republican base, it's an open question as to whether they'll really be able to perform in that general election, especially with moderate and independent voters who don't really like Trump's appeal and really aren't so fond of some of these culture war issues. The second group of candidates we're going to look at is almost entirely made up of former Trump administration officials who are trying to walk that fine line between being close to Trump by proximity of working for him, but also pushing back on some of the most divisive parts of his politics and rhetoric. So, these people will refer to them as Trump-light candidates. They're kind of in an awkward position because they don't really fit into any voting demographic that's going to propel them over the finish line. They're too closely associated to Donald Trump for those moderates and independents to be really comfortable with them, as they really have come out and defended Donald Trump probably one too many times on controversial issues, but when it comes to the base of the Republican Party, they've thrown Trump onto the bus a few too many times, especially with regards to January 6th. All 3 of the people I named at the start of the section came out very much against what President Trump did, and of course, we all remember the chants of "Hang Mike Pence." So, him especially, but all 3 of them really don't have a strong electorate within the Republican base that are going to get them through the primary for them to even have a chance in the general election. And even if they manage to get there, that association of working for Trump and helping bring his policies into effect could prove a very easy avenue of attack for whoever the Democratic challenger is and really prevent them from gaining a lot of traction with the broader national electorate. The last group of candidates we're going to discuss represent a more Reagan and Bush era take on the Republican Party, and so we're going to refer to them as the old establishment. Unlike the new establishment, which of course reflects the 2010 Tea Party movement, the rise of the Freedom Caucus, and of course the election of Donald Trump, as despite the fact that they promote themselves as anti-establishment, they really do form the core of the current Republican leadership. But back to these more old establishment candidates. We're looking at people like Tim Scott of South Carolina, Larry Hogan of Maryland, and Chris Sununu out of New Hampshire. These candidates don't really care so much about these niche culture war issues, and they really push back against the aggressive rhetoric and that own the libs mentality. They're more trying to return to the Bush era idea of compassionate conservatism, adopting policies that will support conservative values, reduce the size of government, cut taxes, all those very traditional Republican things, while at the same time acknowledging that, just like most Republicans say that we want to be left alone to worship God, shoot our guns, whatever, other people want that as well who may not agree with us. So, yes, if gay people want to marry, sure, whatever. Again, we want to be left alone, so let's leave them alone. And they want to just take a more unifying stance to the country and return to a more normal political discourse. And I think that this would actually do very well in the general election. Polling amid the electorate says that the Republicans do just tend to be perceived as better on the economy, and that is a very prevalent issue, especially as there are still issues with the prices of certain household goods and inflation. I think they'd have a very good shot in the general election of defeating Joe Biden or really any Democratic challenger, because they can lean into what the public perceives Republicans to be strong on, as well as bringing that more moderate tone to the discourse that I think a lot of moderate and independent voters would appreciate. However, they're never going to make it that far because that is not what the base of the Republican Party wants. They are the old establishment for a reason, and that new, very far-right establishment that supports Donald Trump, DeSantis, and other candidates like them just is not going to give any of these candidates the time of day, let alone their votes. So, while these candidates certainly do have that broad national appeal, I don't think they have any chance of making it out of the Republican primary, so it really doesn't matter what they could do on the national stage. They're never going to be the nominee. Obviously, all three of these groups face one major challenge, which is defeating Donald Trump. The former president is still very popular with the base of the Republican Party, and several recent polls have shown him in the lead, very much vying for that front-runner position with Ron DeSantis. So I think it's an open question whether any of these candidates can actually defeat Donald Trump. If I had to put my money on something, I would pick someone from the Trump 2.0 camp, specifically Ron DeSantis. We've seen that the Republican base voters really like Trump's visceral, emotional take on politics, and so they're going to look for a candidate who is very aggressively fighting for them. Someone who's a tough guy, someone who is owning the libs at every turn. Things like that, because that's what's important to them. And I don't think they're going to settle for a Trump-light or old establishment-style candidate because they're just not going to get that same level of validation and satisfaction. So, in the question between whether it'll be Trump or Trump 2.0, what can we look at to see which is more likely? The first factor we need to look at is how many candidates actually announce. Right now we have Trump and Haley, and DeSantis will get in eventually. But all these other people, while they're going around to Iowa, New Hampshire, South Carolina, and kind of testing the waters, none of them have actually announced yet, so we don't know what the official field is going to look like. But we know from 2016 that a larger field benefits Donald Trump. There were some states that he only won by a little over 30%, but he got all or most of the delegates from because that's how the Republican primary is set up. Meanwhile, candidates like DeSantis really are looking for a small field because that limits the number of spoiler candidates, and it really brings the anti-Trump section of the Republican base together, hopefully in a large enough number to defeat Donald Trump. The other thing that we're going to look for is how do these candidates perform on the debate stage? Donald Trump really wasn't taken seriously as a candidate until he stepped up on the debate stage and easily took out all of the more serious candidates. Little Marco, Low Energy Jeb, Lion Ted. He was really just able to pick them apart, and they were not prepared for the onslaught that was Donald Trump. And I think that Donald Trump could very easily do that again in 2024. Ron DeSantis has never shown any particular skill, and a lot of the other camps, the Trump lights and the more old establishment candidates, really don't have that same aggressive style that you need to combat Trump. And among those base voters, they're going to say, well, if you can't beat Trump on this stage while we're watching, we're not going to trust you to really be that tough person who's going to fight for us. And I think they're going to give their votes to Trump in that case. But again, we're going to stick with DeSantis because he's the most likely to beat Trump. DeSantis could get up there and say, yeah, Donald Trump, say what you want, but I won, you lost, your candidates all lost. We know where the Republican Party really needs to be going, and that's my way. And I think that could be a very powerful statement for DeSantis to make. He's already starting to allude to that, but he hasn't said it directly yet. So we'll have to see if DeSantis can actually out-Trump Trump on the debate stage, or if one of these other candidates can surprise us in the same way that Donald Trump did back in 2016. But regardless of how things kind of shape up over the next couple months, I think it's going to be really interesting to watch how candidates from all three of these camps run their campaigns, and we'll have to wait and see who ends up becoming the leader of the Republican Party in 2024. Think about it. Thanks for watching. If you want to see more of my content, subscribe to the channel and make sure to hit the bell icon so that you get notified whenever I post new videos. If you want to support me on my other social media platforms, all of the links you need will be in the video description below. If you have any questions about this video or another topic that you'd like me to discuss, leave me a comment and I'll do my best to get you an answer. Thanks again for watching, and have a great day.